Hello and welcome to a special evening news extra on the day British comedy lost one of its true greats. Everything Ronnie Barker touched seemed to turn to comedy gold. From the Two Ronnies to Porridge to Open All Hours, he created some of the most memorable comic characters ever to appear on British television and took part in sketches which decades later still stand the test of time. Over the next half hour, we'll hear from close colleagues like Ronnie Corbett and David Jason and other stars from the world of show business. All day, you've been voting for your top 5 Ronnie Barker sketches. Now's your chance to hear them. First up, one of his most memorable scenes from The Two Ronnies.
Good evening. I am the president of the Loyal Society for the Relief of Sufferers from Mispronunciation. For people who cannot say their worms correctly, or who use the wrong worms entirely so that other people cannot understand the bird they are spraying. It's just that you open your mouths and the worms come turbling out in Wakasay that you dick not what you're thugging about. And it's very distressing. I'm always looing it, and it makes one feel uncomfortable.
On now to one of Ronnie's most famous characters, the crafty Con Fletcher, and some classic Porridge. And next, an early sketch from the Frost Report in the 1960s, also featuring John Cleese and Ronnie Corbett.
I look down on him because I am upper class.
I look up to him because he is upper class. But I look down on him because he is lower class. I am middle class. I know my place.
And I know my place as well. Joining me in the studio is Sir David Frost, who worked with Ronnie Barker on the programme that gave us that sketch, The Frost Report. Do you remember when that was shot?
Yes, I remember that. It was a programme on class, as you'd guess. The idea for the sketch came from a Scottish guy, a brilliant script editor called John Law. And one knew it was going to live on, that sketch. And I mean, it gets, the photos of it and the things get replayed in the sketch to this day, you know. And then we went on from that, obviously, after the Frost Report to starting to do the Two Ronnies at LWT, and then that back to the BBC, and then Porridge and the rest after that. And he was growing all the time. I mean, he was not in weight, but I mean just in terms of his honing his skills, you know. And then of course, as we were saying earlier, he became this brilliant writer. And when he started writing, nobody knew it was him, because he put his sketches in because he wanted them, he said later, to be fairly judged and people not. So we got sketches from an unknown short story writer called Gerard Wiley. And very rare you get sketches. You get one-liners from the public, but a whole sketch from the public, perfectly constructed, you don't usually. So we tried to get in touch with, but the alleged agent of Gerard Wiley said no, he's a hermit, he's a very quiet man, and he doesn't want to be contacted.
They were good sketches, were they?
Yeah, and they were brilliant. Yeah. And everyone with a great punchline, which was obviously one of the things he really cared about. And then we desperately wanted to find who this Gerard Wiley was. And then finally the word came on the last show that he was going to come, Gerard Wiley was going to attend the end-of-show party afterwards. And just before that, Ronnie Corbett had contacted Gerard Wiley through his agent to say, could he use one of the sketches in his summer season at Margate? And Gerard Wiley had come back and said, £1,000. Well, Ronnie Corbett says to Ronnie Barker, not now, he says, bloody hell, look here, this bloody Wiley's asking me £1,000. Oh, I wouldn't stand for that, Ronnie Barker. So they had this dialogue, and eventually he said he could have it for nothing. And so 4 days before this particular moment, Ronnie Corbett had gone out and got 6 crystal decanter glasses and so on, for a thank you to Ronnie Barker, basically. And he'd sent them off and so on and so forth. So we get to this party afterwards. We're waiting. Story in the Londoner's Diary. Who is Gerard Wiley? We think it's Tom Stoppard. No, said someone else. We think it's Carol Brahms and so on. And then, so gathering in the restaurant, and Frank Muir, who was the head of light entertainment, came in, and everyone said, "Oh, it's you, Frank. It's you, Frank." No. He said, "I just got flu, so I just came to say I'm sorry, I can't stay." Oh, it's not him. So, and everyone was waiting to see who was going to. Was it Tom Stoppard? And eventually, Ronnie Barker stands up and says, "I am Gerard Wiley." And Ronnie Corbett says, bloody hell, I've just sent you 6 decanters and, and all of that. But, and then everybody asked him why he'd done it that way. But no one guessed. No one guessed. And the betting was... Tom Stoppard was the favourite at about 3 to 1, and so on and so forth. But it's rather nice that he did it that way, because he just didn't want people to have to say, well, it's very good or it's nearly right, but they were brilliant. Every single sketch, I could list them, but they're so beautifully constructed they take too long. But I mean, and each one, he often started with the punchline and then went all the way back into the sketch. So the sketch was funny in its own right, and the punchline had a real...
interesting. But the two of them there, jousting, Ronnie Corbett, Ronnie, but the beginning of such a brilliant partnership.
Oh, a brilliant relationship. I mean, the only other relationship like it, I suppose, was Morecambe and Wise. And they were different to Morecambe and Wise because they never liked to be compared to Morecambe and Wise, because they were actors in their own right doing this at one particular point. And we were all amazed when Ronnie, partially fears of his health, but when he decided to retire, because he was very much a family man. He was fantastically happily married to Joy, and that was very important to me. And he said to me, well, one of the reasons that I gave up was I'd been offered the best stage part of my life as Falstaff at the National Theatre, and I found myself worrying about the traffic between Pinner and the South Bank. And he said, I thought, if I'm worrying about the traffic getting there when it's the biggest part of my life, it's time to give up. Yeah. So that may be one of the reasons why he gave up. But of course, he was a great loss. Ronnie Corbett's career has blossomed ever since. But I mean, he will be hugely missed. Well, he has been hugely missed, of course, already in one sense, because he hasn't been performing for the last 15 years.
I read the day about Ronnie Barker that he was essentially a shy man.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. He was very much a home-loving man, and the home life with Joy was so good and so on. And he wasn't on the party circuit very much. Partially, perhaps, because of the traffic from Pinner. I don't know whether that was part of it, but he was a shy man. He wasn't the extrovert performer. He was not a stand-up performer. I mean, Ronnie Corbett could act, but also he could do stand-up comedy, of course.
You talked about his writing and his writing ability, but he could write a great line and he could deliver a great line, couldn't he?
And well, that's the great thing, I think, that I mean, as an actor, he knew the way the writer's mind worked, and as a writer, he knew the way the actor's mind worked. Do you know what I mean? So he didn't give actors possible things to say, and he knew with other people's material, that just how to play it, and that's what made. And they just had that. Well, the other thing is chemistry, isn't it? I mean, that's the other key quality. The two of them had this extraordinary chemistry that came through when sketches didn't go well or whatever. I remember one sketch when he was the unknown Gerard Wiley, and they did a Christmas sketch which didn't go down very well. And as they came off, Ronnie Barker turned to Ronnie Corbett and said, bloody Wiley really let us down there, didn't he? And just keeping up the facade.
Do you think they had to work hard at this partnership, or was it something that just came naturally, do you think?
I don't think you can work hard at chemistry. It's either there or not. But yes, they were perfectionists, both of them, in every other way. And so they did work hard. They didn't have to work hard on the relationship, but they did have to work hard on the material, because sketch after sketch after sketch. And I mean, Ronnie Barker stands for all time as that outstanding sketch player. And then when we did Porridge and so on, I mean, what a great character we saw just there. I mean, that was brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. I wonder which sketch your viewers will pick. It'll be interesting to see.
I've got a sort of suspicion that it will be the Four Candles. But anyway, I mean, I don't know, and I'm not being told in my ear. But we'll find out.
Interest.
It will be interesting. But we've got another great comedian with us now. Ken Dodd is up there in Liverpool, I assume. Ken, what are your memories of Ronnie Barker?
He was wonderful. He was a superb comedy actor and a very, very nice man as well. He was very charming, very warm, very lovable, very modest. He was very, very modest. But he was the best. He was the best comedy actor on television, and was and is still the best, because we have his films, we have the videos, we have the recordings of the shows. So anybody who wants a really, really good laugh can still watch Ronnie Barker, and people who want to learn about television comedy can look at these shows and say, that was the professor, that was the maestro, he was the best.
You talked about his great acting and his great writing. It was the combination of everything, wasn't it? His timing as well.
Yes, his timing was absolutely superb. A lot of people, some actors say that timing is really being able to get out of the back door of the theatre before the audience can get round to the front. But seriously, his timing was beautiful. I remember Kenneth Griffiths once saying that you don't just tell a joke, you sing it. And that's what timing really is. You phrase a joke like Frank Sinatra would phrase a song, and that is really timing. And Ronnie Barker was able to do it. Also, as well as being warm and brilliant and disciplined and a perfectionist, he was also very vulnerable. I think the great clowns, the great comics, always have to have something makes you want to protect them. And Ronnie Barker was like that. You felt that you knew him. He was the fellow you sat next to on the train or the bus, and you loved him. Yes, he was lovable. You loved him. And he and Ronnie Corbett, they were two perfect poles of comedy. The poles, there's like Laurel and Hardy. They were the best double act on television. They're absolutely
Well, it's
wonderful.
Interesting because we were talking to Sir David Frost about this just a few moments ago. Does that kind of thing come naturally, or did they have to work hard? I'm very interested in whether behind the scenes they really had to work hard at this incredible double act.
I think everybody has to work hard, and I think with the double act they have to learn, they had to trust each other. They had to trust each other absolutely implicitly to know that how the other one was going to react, because there's a lot of trust in a double act. A double act is a perfect situation comedy. It's a situation comedy in itself, the straight and the comic. I'm a solo comedian, I think, and but I work off the audience. The audience are the other half of my double act. But they were the perfect double act. I can't pay them a higher compliment than to say that they were as good as Laurel and Hardy. Yes.
Well, that is quite a compliment. I always thought you did have the Diddy Men, didn't you? You weren't on your own.
Oh, the Diddy Men really represented, in my mind, they represented little comic imps, little imps. And Ronnie Barker had that. At the back of in his eyes, you could see this little comic imp. Always wanted to have a little go. Look at the world a different way. He liked saucy postcards. And he was never blue. He was never blue. No, he was clean as a whistle. He had one or two. I think he had a foot in music hall and in the legitimately in acting. He had a bit of both. He was able to relate to stand-up comics in Variety, and also he was a very consummate actor. He was a lovely, lovely man, and we all loved him, and we're all going to miss him so much. But we can still watch his shows. Exactly,
we can, and. Thanks for that, and thanks to you as well, Ken Dodd, without the Diddy Men. Thanks very much indeed for coming and joining us. Just, I must ask you, David Frost, we're asking the viewers for their favourite sketches. Do you have a sketch which either stands out in your memory or is your all-time favourite? Or
Well, there was the first sketch that Gerard Wiley ever wrote, which was set in a doctor's waiting room. I don't know how else you describe it, really, but that was outstanding. The Class sketch had a huge impact, so that remains a great favourite of mine. And I think Ken said one very interesting thing there when he said the thing about a double act needs trust. And that's absolutely true, because you sometimes see actors, one's trying to upstage the other one and so on, and there's no trust there. And I think trust is a very, very important quality. And, of course, also, as Ken said, he was never blue, Ronnie Barker, never needed to rely on that.
And also generous. I mean, was sort of saying some of the lines should be better spoken by someone else. And a generous,
unselfish
part of a double act as well. Yeah. OK. Well, David Frost, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Indeed. Well, later we'll be hearing from David Jason, who appeared in Open All Hours with Ronnie Barker. Here are two of them, the two of them now, proving no words are needed for some comedy. Still to come, we'll hear from David Jason, who featured in Open All Hours there with Ronnie Barker. Plus, the more diminutive of the two Ronnies pays his own tribute.
The creme de la creme he was as a performer, as a writer, and as a person, really. He was just, an absolute gem.
That's Ronnie Corbett, who played alongside Ronnie Barker, of course, for 40 years here. His memories of their extraordinary career together after the break. Welcome back to Evening News Extra and our special half-hour programme Remembering Ronnie Barker. Well, Ronnie Corbett, Barker's comedy partner for 4 decades, tonight led the tributes to his friend and colleague. The more diminutive one of the pair described his career with Barker as 40 years of harmonious joy.
The creme de la creme he was as a performer, as a writer, and as a person, really. He was just, an absolute gem. This huge array of his talents and his voices and his characters. And he was, an encyclopedia of comedy, really. So you're talking about the very best.
And what was it that made him unique?
Ronnie Barker was unique in so many different ways. He was unique because, of course, he had this huge array, this panoply of people he could be, voices, characters, looks, and because he'd trained as a character actor and rep, he had this huge sort of armoury, and he was infinitely careful in how each one was developed in detail, and the sound. He was quite daunting to try and do a funny voice alongside, I can assure you, because he had, they came to him with such ease, And me, who was just about quite good at pretending to be me, was very easily overshadowed by all these wondrous voices. But he was just an absolutely splendid, uniquely funny person.
Aside from the two Ronnies, what was his greatest comic creation, do you think? Which?
Well, I love them all. I particularly love Open All Hours, I have to say. I find that, because it's somehow still today, the little shop, whereas the prison looks like a real, I suppose there are prisons looking like that still, I'm afraid, but the shop is still very much, you can run into a little shop like that, and also I love that. And but I just love watching it. But the shop, I think, was my favourite, yes.
What was he like to work with?
Well, he was absolute joy. He was a pleasure because of all his, controls and his disciplines. And, we used to, when we were rehearsing, we would say, a week for the two Ronnies, we'd perhaps have 5 sketches, and we would say to each other, well, we'll do the Rook restaurant, and we'll do 4 candles, and do that, and tomorrow we'll know these. And we come in the next day, and the next day we knew all 3. We didn't ever go home and say, I forgot, or I got down to the pub and I watched the football and I came back, I didn't get a chance to look at it. That never happened. The next day we knew them, So we worked all our lives like that, So he had these disciplines which...
And on the same wavelength, comedy-wise? Wavelength.
We were on the same wavelength, yes. When we used to get scripts way ahead, when we filmed the filmed items, and then 12 weeks, say, before we go in the studio, we'd get scripts that we would have to read, and we'd mark the top with A, B, A+, or A-, or B+, B-, and we'd come in the next day and look at the scripts, and we marked them all in the same way, so we absolutely agreed on what we thought was funny, which was, a great plus, of course, a great benefit.
The other half of the two Ronnies, Ronnie Corbett there, paying tribute to his comedy colleague. Now, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by another famous name from the world of television and radio, Nicholas Parsons. Thank you for coming in.
It was a great pleasure.
In your view, what made Ronnie Barker this great comedy genius?
Well, he was the consummate professional. I think he's probably, if not the greatest character comedy actor we've ever produced. You think of Peter Sellers, but he was unique in his way. But Ronnie had an exceptional quality, which was in pure Ronnie. But he had a wonderful pedigree. One has to remember that. He had his time in rep, training as an actor, playing every different part. He could do different voices, he'd do different characters. But he was essentially, he was never a stand-up comedian. He was a character comedy performer. He was very modest and unassuming about his talent, but at least he had that assurance that he knew he had achieved something. Because in his later life, you know, they did offer him the part of Inspector Clouseau when Peter Sellers died, and he turned it down, because I think he thought, first of all, I've already proved that I can do things. I don't want to take over somebody else's role. He liked creating his own characters. And all of his characters, when you look at the two Ronnies, were exceptional. They were broad, they were amazing, and they were funny, but they were never caricatures. There was that wonderful underlying comedy truth, which is so essential. His timing was absolutely impeccable, and that is the art of comedy. I mean, the art of acting is timing, but the art of comedy acting is more sophisticated timing. And Ronnie had that in spades. He could take a simple line and inflect it with the character he played and make it funny. My favourite was always Porridge. And when you think, this was set in a prison, Fletcher was a villain, and there he was, but Ronnie had this wonderful warmth and this engaging character and personality. You loved him. When he had those scenes with Mackay, the
prison warder.
The prison warder, you know, he was the heavy, and you always wanted Fletcher to put one over on Mackay. And I think it was his greatest comedy creation. And there was the aggression, the power, there was the warmth, and there was the rapport. But you see, Ronnie, having trained as an actor, I know this from having worked with comedians. I had 10 years with a great comic, and it's what Ken Dodd said. It's the partnership. It's the playing the tennis, playing it back and forth. And you had that complete trust in each other, and you know. And Ronnie was givey. Always, he gave out as much as he received back. He was very generous, and it's a generous performer that gets more back, and that's why his partnership with Ronnie Corbett was so essentially successful.
All right, Nicholas, we've got some callers on the line. Rachel Turner from Swindon is on the line now. What are your memories or favourite memories of Ronnie Barker?
Which was in Ronnie's own character. In private life, you know, he was incredibly unassuming. He was completely modest. He was not, what we often say, he was not theatrical in any way. He was not anywhere near what you'd term a lovey. He was very quiet and shy. He put all of his talent and energy into the performances he gave. And it came out, and with, I said, the pedigree he had before, he was able to give some of the most definitive comedy character performances that anybody's ever given in this country. And I think that will be his lasting legacy. And that's why his shows will go on being repeated, because they are irreplaceable. And we've always produced great character comedians in our country. And we've always produced great sketch comedians. And then on television, we used to have a lot of sketch comedies. Unfortunately, we have less now. They're expensive to make, and that's one of the reasons.
This is an interesting point we'll get onto in just a second, Nicholas. We've got another caller first on the line, Charles Baker from Doncaster. What would you like to say about Ronnie Barker?
Oh, absolutely. What can I say? 4 generations. I mean, I'm 45 myself. I was raised man and boy on his material. What can I add to what's already been said, other than the fact is that his timing and his character, the depth of his character and his delivery, everything was superb. And it was also, his characters was a reflection of a wider society of his time, and people always look back with fondness of these times. And Ronnie Barker was definitely the king of them.
Well, that's very interesting you should say that. I mean, I can remember earlier this year watching Nicholas with my children, the looking back at you know, the two Ronnie sketchbooks. They were looking back at some of their old script, and my children loved them.
Yes.
I loved them when I was a kid. I mean, it's proof, isn't it, that his programmes span generations.
Absolutely, because they are timeless, and all good comedy is timeless. I mean, you can look at Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, all the great comics of the past. Their comedy, because they were so great, it had that comedy genius, and I believe that Ronnie Barker had a touch of comedy genius.
But does it also highlight the lack, the paucity of great sitcoms and great comedy talent now?
No, I think comedy's changed a little bit, reflecting the times in which we live. I mean, you think of Little Britain. I mean, the two of them are brilliant, and that's where they've taken it. You have equal players there together, and Catherine Tate's show is also extraordinarily funny. But we have less of that now than we used to have before. We used to have a lot of great comedy, situation comedies and comedy sketches, and therefore it's more difficult for a comedy performer to break through. And if you get the, and also it's just more difficult to get the training. As I said earlier on, Ronnie had all that wonderful training and rep, playing lots of different characters. Then he did a lot on the radio. I remember him, my friend Alistair Foote wrote that thing, Steady Barker, which he did. And then from that he was in the Navy Lark. He got all this wonderful trainer's background. So when he eventually hit the big time, he had all that experience and was able to grab it with both hands and display the huge, huge talent that he had.
And just finally, we'll be watching Ronnie Barker programmes, presumably for years to come.
I think so, and I will always remember with the greatest affection those wonderful musical sketches they did at the end of the two Ronnies, which were wonderfully put together, wonderfully conceived, great characters, great sketches. Those are the sort of things they can't really afford to do now, because you have music, choreography, and the singing as well. And I think those are quite timeless. They're little musical gems. They're comedy pastiches, and they should be seen just as themselves. And Ronnie will always be remembered, and I will personally remember him with huge affection, because he had such a warm, generous personality to all other performers.
OK, Nicholas Parsons, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Now, the sketch, which seems to have captured most people's imagination today. Sally from Eastbourne, James from Leicestershire, Pete from Oxfordshire were among those who texted us, all asking for 4 candles.
4 candles.
4 candles. Here you are. 4 candles.
No, 4 candles.
Well, there you are, 4 candles.
No, 4 candles. Handles for forks. Got any plugs?
Plugs?
Yeah.
What kind of plugs?
A rubber one, bathroom.
What size?
13 amp.
Plugs, electric bathroom plugs, you call them. A trade, electric bathroom. Right.
Saw tips.
Saw tips. What do you want, ointment or something like that?
No, saw tips, but covering the saws. Tips.
No, we haven't got any. Coming in, but we haven't got any.
Got any O's?
O's?
O's. No O's.
O's? I thought you meant O's. O's. You say O's, you think you said O's. O's, he meant O's.
No O's.
O's? What a... Oh, you mean pantyhose? Pantyhose?
No, O's. O's for the gate. Mon repose. O's. Letter O's.
Letter O's. many do you want?
2.
2. Right. Yeah, next.
Got any peas?
God's sake, why didn't you bleeding tell me that I'm upstairs? I'm upstairs already for that. They tell me bleeding there. I'm up and down the shop all the time. I've got all the shop. I'm without any help today. You must tell me when I'm planning things. I'm planning by the way.
There we are. It doesn't go on long enough, does it? The famous 4-candle sketch from the 2 Ronnies, and that was the overwhelming favourite today. That's it from me, but there's plenty more still to come from him.
That's all we've got time for this evening, so it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. Good night. Good night.
British comedy bids farewell to one of its truly great performers. More on Ronnie Barker in just a few moments.